Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Koshiba. I'm the Director of Public Safety for the Lower Paxton Township Police Department. We're here today to discuss the incidents and events that transpired on June 28th and June 29th at 5336 Manayunk Road in Lower Paxton Township. With me today is District Attorney Fran Chardo, the Deputy District Attorney Jen Gettle. To her left is Director Rob Martin. He is in charge of the Dauphin County CRT. We have representatives from the fire department next to him, through the city fire department and EMS on down. To my right is Deputy Chief Justin DePasqua. To his right is Lieutenant Tom Bell. And moving on down, we'll have representatives from Dauphin County Emergency Communications and from Lower Paxton Township Manager Brad Gutschall, and our Communication Director on the end, Leanne Urban. So speaking initially today will be myself to give you a timeline of events and the information surrounding the events that transpired on those 2 days. Also, District Attorney Fran Chardo will be speaking with you about the incident, as will CRT Commander Chief Rob Martin, and Lower Paxton Township Manager Brad Gutschall will also have some comments for us today, and then we'll take questions. So we're here to discuss the events that occurred in those 2 days. As most of you probably are aware, the offender, Derek Hutcherson, is 36 years of age, 6'4", and 225 pounds. That becomes important as we listen later on to the size of the victims that we're dealing with. Last known residence of the individual was the Interface Shelter on 120 Willow Road. I'm going to give you a timeline of some of the things that, as far as the the Lower Paxton police contacts with this individual, and it should paint the picture for you of who we are dealing with here. In 2005, and this is all related to Mr. Hutcherson, in 2005, we had a domestic violence complaint with him. Again, in 2005, he was an individual associated with a burglary. In 2007, we experienced and had him with an aggravated assault, or actually his history included an aggravated assault, aggravated robbery, and felonious assault. These could be a combination of Ohio charges and or those in Pennsylvania. In 2008, he had an aggravated robbery with felonious assault. In 2011, carrying concealed weapons. In 2012, carrying concealed weapons, unlawful possession, improper handling of a firearm, and possible weapons while under disability. Our previous contact with this individual, specifically to the Lower Paxton Township Police Department, included in 6/28 of 2021 at 9:43 hours. We responded to the address that I had mentioned to you earlier where this all occurred for a verbal domestic between Mr. Hutchinson and victim Mariah Lewis. This was a verbal domestic with no signs of any kind of assault that had occurred. She did not report any threats or threats of injury or any injuries to her. He was seen on his way by the officers that responded. On August 2nd, 2020, 20:36 hours, neighborhood dispute between Mr. Hutchinson and a nearby resident. 4/27/2020 hours, we dealt with him again at 12:12 hours, childhood custody dispute between Lewis and Hutcherson. No reported threats or injuries at that time. 7/4 of 2019 dealt with him again, drugs and DUI paraphernalia arrest. 10/22/2019 issue with Interface Shelter issues and him. And October 15th, 2019, we dealt with him once again, allegation of a verbal threat against the child, 10 months old at that time, could not be substantiated. A child line referral was made at that particular time. In October 14th of 2019 at 14:16 hours, a domestic issue at the Interface Shelter involving the opening of mail. No injuries, no arrest. 10/13 of 19, again, we dealt with him, child custody issue. 10/11/19, child custody issue complaint. 6/29/2019, Hutcherson and Lewis contacted for sleeping. We contacted him, for sleeping in a vehicle within one of our parks. So you see that we've had multiple interactions with this individual that led us up to the last 2 days. Talk a little bit about the victims that we dealt with. Mariah Lewis age 25. Now, keeping in mind his size versus her size and the victims here. She's 5'1", 191 pounds, much smaller than he was. Mariah was allegedly shot in the face by Hutcherson on Monday, 6/28. That's what prompted the 911 calls and our response to that residence, or actually the adjoining property. She underwent surgery on 6/29 and is now in stable condition and currently hospitalized. Wanda Jackson, the other victim that was a hostage within that incident, age 79, she was checked out by EMS, evaluated by EMS, and is fine. Ace Hutcherson, age 2, he was also evaluated after the incident concluded by EMS, and he too is fine as a result and did not require any further medical attention. I want to say thank you to all the agencies that assisted us in dealing with this event for the full 33 hours that we dealt with it. Those departments and agencies are the Susquehanna Township Police Department, the Swadera Township Police Department, Derry Township Police Department, Dauphin County CRT, Cumberland County CRT, the Pennsylvania State Police Special Emergency Response Team, Dauphin County Dispatchers, Colonial Park Fire Company, Paxtonia Fire Company, Lingelstown Fire Company, Harrisburg Bureau of Fire, South Central EMS, Lower Paxton Township Public Works, the Lower Paxton Township Communications Manager, Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors, and our manager, Mr. Gutshaw, and the Lower Paxton Township Crime Victim Advocate. Our mental health co-responder also participated in this. The Dauphin County District Attorney's Office, obviously, led by District Attorney Chardo and Chief Deputy DA Jen Gettle. And also, they often go unrecognized, but the management and the residents of that complex that dealt with the influx of police, fire, and EMS people, units for over the course of those 2 days, and the individuals that had to be evacuated from their apartments for their safety. We appreciate your efforts. We appreciate your cooperation, and we're sorry to have to displace you, but it was for your own safety. So quickly, I will give you, I'm going to hand this out to you afterwards, but I want to give some highlights of what we were dealing with over the course of the 2 incidents that occurred at that particular location. We were, as I said before, dispatched at 5336 Manayunk Road on Monday, 6/28, for a domestic dispute. We were dispatched at 9:42. We arrived at 9:43 and later cleared at 10:07 hours. And what's important about this, I'm going to give you a time after this incident concluded. This was a verbal domestic with no injuries, and we can touch later on why he was not arrested. Obviously, no injuries. We escorted him on his way and saw that he left the property. What we came to know, and we are still further investigating, is he left that property and arrived at Capital City Buy and Sell at 11:04 hours and departed that particular location at 11:27 hours. So we know he was in there for that long. We're still looking to see what he was selling, what he was buying. We don't have that information just yet. Now, he left there at 11:27. We receive a dispatch for the report of the shooting of his girlfriend at 12:02 hours. Our officers arrived within 2 minutes and located the victim outside an adjoining apartment complex. We immediately established a command. She was able to provide us with very specific information to where she was shot, what the apartment was, and where he was located, and the fact that he was still there, which saved many officers' lives and potentially the officers' lives that would have entered that building and the victims inside. We established a command post. We requested EMS for the patient, and she was quickly transported within minutes to Hershey Medical Center, where she remains today. We requested the Dauphin County CRT within minutes of her being transported. Obviously, you know the events that occurred, but I'm not going to prolong that. You'll see that as the timeline occurs. But as the course went on, you know that we were doing everything that we could, both with negotiations and some of the things with our perimeter to try and get this to end peacefully. And ultimately it did, but with the assistance of the CRT and the Pennsylvania State Police CERT team. So as I'll reiterate, that I did last night, and then I'll turn it over to District Attorney Chardo. As you know, many of you were out there, 2 long days with our officers, with many of the first responders out there in extreme heat conditions, all because of this individual chose the actions that he did over the course of that time. And thankfully, we were able to bring that to a successful resolution. And with that, I'll pass this over to District Attorney Chardo.
Thank you, Director. I stand here in awe of the professionals who brought this situation to a peaceful conclusion. The police, and in particular, the tactical teams, the Dauphin County CERT team, the PSP CERT team, who worked in conjunction to bring this person into custody, are true heroes and incredible. This was a 33-hour standoff, and using that time, many people would have rushed in, and it could have had tragic conclusion, but used time and patience to bring it to a peaceful conclusion, knowing that time was an asset that we had and that he did not have. And I am in awe of them. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened before. Director Kashiba mentioned that the defendant has had prior contacts with law enforcement. That was relevant. Obviously, the tactical teams want to get as much information as they can as they are staging, so they know whom they're dealing with. And I don't want that to be misused in any way. I want to ensure that the defendant gets a fair trial. He remains presumed innocent unless until convicted. And in fact, some of those charges did not result in a conviction. Some of them did not even, those contacts did not result in charges. But the contacts were relevant in order to get intelligence on this individual and to know whom they were dealing with, and that's why we mentioned them, that he had had prior contacts. And in particular, the contacts on that morning, there was a domestic that between him and the eventual victim who was shot in the face. But under Pennsylvania law, if there was no signs of injury in a misdemeanor assault, the police have no authority to make a warrantless arrest. And in fact, there was no sign of injury. It seemed to be a verbal altercation. They had no authority to detain him whatsoever, and they had to release him on his way under Pennsylvania law. And so they did exactly the right thing under the law. Unfortunately, Mr. Hutcherson had other ideas, and he continued this, and it was he that escalated the situation. And it was he that went back and escalated this incredibly, firing on Mariah Lewis, shooting her, and which ultimately caused her to lose her eye. By any definition, serious bodily injury. He's charged with aggravated assault and attempted murder, and it is the attempted murder that carries with it up to 40 years of imprisonment because it caused serious bodily injury. And he's charged with burglary of an occupied residence. Those charges were brought forthwith because the police needed authority to make entry into that house. A search warrant is obtained. And he commits further crimes during the course of this standoff. He commits the crimes of kidnapping. Wanda Jackson, age 79, held at gunpoint for those 33 hours, menaced with a firearm. Ace, the 2-year-old, held at gunpoint and held at close as a human shield, both of them, at all times during that standoff, and at the very end, when he knows the police are making entry, he uses them as human shields. One of the elements of kidnapping is that it be a protracted period of holding someone in a place of isolation, and by any definition, that is what happened here, and that is what we intend to add those 2 charges of kidnapping of a 79-year-old woman and a 2-year-old child that placed them in extraordinary circumstances of harm. In addition, he fired off multiple rounds, both during the standoff and at the time that the CERT team was retaking the residence. And we are examining that in order to determine what charges should be brought in connection with those actions. Ordinarily, we bring all charges in a single criminal complaint. That was not possible in this case because we needed an arrest warrant in order to put him into custody, but we're going to continue the investigation. Throughout this morning and afternoon, the Lower Paxton Township Police and our Dauphin County Forensic Team were processing the scene. The Lower Paxton Township Police were conducting interviews so that we can determine what additional charges we can bring that are appropriate so that we can ensure that justice is done in this case. Again, I want to thank all the individuals involved for their heroic acts in connection with these events. I am truly in awe of their actions. It was a long period of 33 hours, as I say, and the professionalism that I saw was extraordinary. And I thank them all, and I commend them for their professionalism. Director.
Director Martin.
Chief, thank you, and District Attorney Chardo, thank you for kind words. First of all the residents of Dauphin County can be proud today of all the first responders that serve them 24 hours a day, every day of the year, in fire, EMS, police, emergency management agency, across the spectrum of public safety. All of the residents of this county can be proud that they are served nobly and professionally. First, a commendation and a thank you to Chief Kashiba and all of his staff for what, after 37 years in this profession, I view as a textbook operation. The long and storied tradition of the Lower Paxton Township Police being a professional model in Dauphin County and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has once again been demonstrated. To the members of the Dauphin County Crisis Response Team and the Pennsylvania State Police Emergency Response Team, I only have 2 words, and they echo District Attorney Chardo's. Heroes all. Absolute professionals, noble examples of law enforcement. They all worked under very difficult conditions and performed in a heroic manner. And speaking of a long and storied tradition, the assistance and performance of the members of the Pennsylvania State Police Special Emergency Response Team assisting us, and then their role in this 2-day event once again prove why they are the finest state police organization in the United States of America. And lastly, media, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you to do something, because we all just went through a very tumultuous 2 days with a center of gravity of rescuing and keeping safe a 79-year-old lady and a 2-year-old child. Here's my question that I ask you to dig into. What kind of a man does that? What kind of a man does that? Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Gottschalk, the Lower Paxton Township Manager.
Hello all. Thank you again, Brad Gottschall, Lower Paxton Township Manager. I can't add any more technical or legal addition to what has already been said today by all these fine individuals. All that I can say, and speaking on behalf of the Board of Supervisors of Lower Paxton Township, the board continues to have the full backing and the very appreciative support of the Lower Paxton Township Police Department, as well as all of the fine first responders of Lower Paxton Township. As mentioned this afternoon, you saw an incredible conglomeration of different agencies as well as township departments come together in a single event to bring about real incredible outcome. As I told the director last night as this thing was wrapping up, there are a million things that could have gone wrong at any step of the way, and not one did. So the director should be an immensely proud individual today, and the Board of Supervisors, is immensely appreciative to you, to everyone that was involved from all agencies and all departments. I thank you very much.
Okay, at this time, I'll open it up for a few questions and direct those individuals you may be referencing those questions about and bring them up to the podium. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us as much as you can about the decision to act, to go in when you did? Like, what was it based on, and why did you choose that time?
So it was based on the 33 hours, obviously, that we spent with him. Numerous negotiators doing what they needed to do to try different avenues to get this individual to come out in a peaceful manner and surrender without any harm to those individuals inside. As we did that, and did that in conjunction with some of the tactics of the two different TAC teams, we saw that the negotiations were not moving in a positive manner any longer. Every time we would try and meet some of his demands, he would counter those demands as if what he received was not good enough. Seeing that moving in the direction, seeing his just whole demeanor change over 33 hours, we felt it was necessary to end this before he took action and did harm to those individuals inside. So again, based on what I said last night, I can't say enough how difficult that decision was to do that hostage rescue operation. There was so much potential for so many things to go wrong. And because of the professionalism of all of our special emergency responders, our tactical teams, and those involved, we were able to bring it to a successful resolution with no shots fired by the police. Now, I will tell you, and you've heard, that he did shoot at our officers multiple times. And that was something that we looked at, and that was also on our list, that when they went into that residence, we highly anticipated that one or more of our officers would be shot during this rescue. So.
And could you just shed a little light on like what his demeanor and attitude was in these, especially in the latter part of the negotiations, and what his intent was towards police? Was he truly trying to shoot? Do you feel he was truly trying to shoot officers?
His demeanor throughout the incident, and as we continued to the end resolution of the incident, was more and more agitation. There were certain things we had to do on a tactical perspective to trigger responses from him, but those responses were extremely elevated based on who we're dealing with. And as that moved forward, it became apparent that we were not going to be able to get him out of there for any reason whatsoever, and we had to go in and rescue those individuals. Yes, ma'am.
Related to, neighbors are so thankful that you guys were there, and they keep talking about how everyone remained so calm, and the gear that they saw, some of those neighbors who stayed. Can you talk about the equipment that was on site that really helped make that rescue? There was a rope from PSB, and the firefighters were even there to help. Are you able to talk about that?
So I'll cover some of that specifically, and then ask Director Martin to step forward specifically about the gear. But yes, the totality of the equipment we had there, millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment that brought it to a successful resolution. The Pennsylvania State Police Emergency Response Team, 2 Rooks, one from the east, one from the west team. Bearcats from the Dauphin County, Cumberland County, Pennsylvania State Police, to armored vehicles to get them into position and protect them. Utilizing one of our township ladder trucks to be an elevated platform for a sniper position, so that if given the opportunity and it was necessary, to go ahead and take the shot that they would need to end this without harm to those individuals inside. EMS units staying there. Fire departments, we actually used multiple fire companies from the township and many of their ground ladders to assist with our tactical members, and thus taking those ladders out of service, so to speak, for any future emergency response. So we're very appreciative of that. And as far as the tactical equipment, I'll pass that over to Director Martin.
I think the chief covered everything that I would cover, and if there's something he didn't cover from a technology perspective, I believe it would be inappropriate for me to speak to it. and not only inappropriate, but it could jeopardize lives in the future. How about we just leave it at that? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Director Kashiba, can you kind of address for viewers who might wonder, with so many run-ins with this particular individual over years, why, some people may wonder why, the incident that happened earlier today didn't result in some kind of distancing beyond that?
I'll leave that for District Attorney Chardo, yes.
Well, there was a summary of contacts. Those contacts did not, most of them were nuisance contacts. They did not support criminal charges for the most part. The one in the morning wouldn't have supported an arrest. It might have supported a summons, but it wouldn't have supported an arrest. But those were nuisance contacts. They weren't ones that would support the filing of criminal charges or would have resulted in his incapacitation or locking him up.
You're dealing with a domestic situation.
And I should say, those are the ones that are local. Director Kashiba referred to some that were in Ohio, and obviously we have no control over ones that are in Ohio.
Does this kind of speak to the nature of the difficult domestic situation?
Well, yeah, I think that whenever you're dealing with a domestic situation, there is always an increased, there's always a potential for someone getting more agitated, and we see that more often in domestic situations. But everybody's different, and it's hard to predict which cases are going to result in someone going rogue, for lack of a better word.
Right, we saw more serious criminal activity in Ohio, and I was able to review some of the documents from there this morning. Can you talk about how much you knew about what happened in our neighboring state and how that, and I think Director Kashiba talked to this a little bit, how that affected the response?
Well, I mean, when you've got I'll let actually Director Kashiba and Director Martin talk about that. I mean, that's going to inform, obviously, the tactical response. So I think I better yield to them.
I'm sorry, if you could repose the question.
Yeah, I was just saying, some of the crime or anything that I've seen in his criminal history, the more serious natured crimes come from Ohio, from a neighboring state. How quickly were you able to find out that he had that history, that activity in Ohio, and how much did that inform your response?
So that was encountered early on. We obviously knew who we were dealing with from the moment we got there, and we knew who our victims were. So we were able to extract that information from the different databases to gather it and analyze it. And based on what we saw, a lot of what we saw out of Ohio led us to the mindset that we were dealing with and we knew we had in front of us on the 2-day operation that we dealt with. Director Martin?
Just, Chief, absolutely. Just not to get into details of that, and I think that was actually part of the question I was asking when I said, what kind of a man does this? I'm asking you to dig. Here's what it told us. Comfort with guns and a comfort with violence. That's who he is. And that's what it told us.
Are we still looking into where he got that firearm? Is that, I mean, I'm assuming that's part of the investigation. Do we know whether or not he had it prior to, or if he picked it up in the interim? I'm assuming that's part of the investigation.
I won't get into specifics on where those firearms came from and who the owner is. I will tell you that we did account for so far that they were not him. He did not buy those firearms. He acquired them. And to be specific, we're going to let the investigation take its course before I could ask and answer any of those
I
questions.
assume not legally, given his criminal history.
He did not acquire those legally, no.
Can you speak a little bit about the initial shooting? How did Mariah get out? Was she already out? How did that play out?
We're told that, and still we're not clear because of her medical state and the inability of us to get a good interview with her, reference to some of the specifics. But we know that she exited the apartment in a very quick manner, and during that exit of the apartment, she was shot by the individual that we're talking about here today. And what a strong woman. What a strong woman she was, because what she did was she fled for her life, and she knew she couldn't help those inside and fled for their lives. And she walked the better part of 150, 200 yards to get help. And not only, as I said earlier, not only did she help herself and those individuals inside, she potentially saved the lives of our officers because we knew where he was when we started setting up that perimeter. Yes, ma'am.
And then directly after that, did he lock the door and lock the two inside?
He did, and I'll provide that on some of the timeline, but yeah, he immediately began barricading himself within that apartment.
And you mentioned the two that were in there, they're fine now, but you know, over the course of those 33 hours, obviously it was hot, there was no AC. You know, when we hear about these extreme heat conditions, the elderly, young children are the first to be, you know, affected by that. So what was their initial condition when they were, you know, pulled out of the apartment?
So just so you're aware, there was a brief period of time on day one and going into the nighttime hours where their power was off. And then coordinating with the CRT members, their power was turned back on during the bulk of the daylight hours when the heat was at its greatest. So those individuals inside, that baby and the grandmother, they had comfort inside there, and they had the ability of food and water, which we know they did not lack that. At a point later, the tactical decision was made, and they lost power later on in the evening, and that started to change things as we progressed with that operation.
What was their emotion like, you know, when they were pulled out?
So I can't speak specifically to any of their emotions because I wasn't at that location. I was at the command post when that occurred, but I can tell you I later spoke with the grandmother, and she was very appreciative of what happened. The family was very appreciative, obviously, for us not having to fire a single shot and save the lives of those individuals.
And how were you guys able to communicate with him? Was it over phone or through a window?
That's a great question. Thank you. What we did come to find out is, and we haven't determined the exact number as they're still processing the scene, he had multiple cell phones with him to include the victim's cell phone he was utilizing throughout the two-day-long event.
Had he made any threats again to harm the hostages?
Yes, multiple times, and we won't get into specifics, but multiple times he made threats that he was going to do certain acts, and we countered those with negotiations, and as the two-day event proceeded, those threats increased. And as those threats increased and our negotiators' inability to bring him back down to a reasonable state, we felt the need to enter.
Tell us more about your method to be able to, you know, stop this without further loss of life. And if you thought it was at the point where you had to do something or there was going to be loss of life.
So I can speak to that briefly and in general terms. You know, we were all on edge in that command post for the 33 hours that we dealt with that operation because we constantly wanted to know about the health and well-being of those two hostages. And I'll be honest with you, it's kind of a situation you just have to look at as it moves along, and we got to a point where we did not believe that he was ever going to exit that residence peacefully without any harm to those individuals inside. So we went ahead and instituted, well, the CRT and PSP teams instituted the dynamic entry.
It sounds like you're saying you think there was it was on the verge of harm. Is that accurate?
Well, I think if you were privy to the conversations through the negotiators and what was happening inside that apartment, the hair on the back of your neck would have stood up multiple times throughout the day about what we felt he was potentially going to do for them. And again, and that's that balance, that patience that we spoke about. We have to have that patience and hopefully not drive a situation to have him harm them or not wait too long to allow him to harm them. So it's that constant balance, juggling act of the ongoing situation that we had to deal with. And if I could tell you that there was some precise, unique method that we did, I think it just ultimately resulted in, like we've talked about last night and here today, patience and the professionalism of all those involved is what got us to the point of no shots fired by police and individuals unharmed.
I can't put myself in his shoes per se, but I imagine a person in that situation when they're negotiating with someone
I'll let Director Martin speak to that.
That's a great question. Fortunately, our team, as well the state police team, are blessed with a lot of negotiators, and there was multiple negotiators throughout the course of this event, definitely.
One other question related to, 33 hours, I think people at home are wondering, did they get to sleep? Was it full 38 hours of, can you provide that? Did you know what he was doing inside?
Did who get sleep? The officers?
No, not the officers, I know you guys are working hard, but inside Hutcherson and the 2-year-old and the other victim.
Well, I can't speak to everything that went on inside because I just won't speak to it. Probably best not to answer that question from an operational perspective, but thank you.
Can you speak a little bit about the grandmother? Was she there earlier in the day and for the first contact with police? And were you able to speak about her movements at all?
Do you know the answer? I don't believe, I'm not sure when she entered that equation, but I can tell you that the victim's mother was at the apartment, and a very short time after she left, the individual we're speaking about re-entered the apartment and began doing what he did.
And then how long did it take for you to get in contact with Hutcherson? And then after that point, were you regularly in contact with him throughout the rest of the standoff?
As many of you probably have seen through social media, he was already projecting certain things through social media. The communication center was conveying a lot of information to us as well. I can't recall the specific time we began phone contact with him, but that phone contact, once we began that, was continual, and which led us to the multiple phones being used. He had access to those phones. He was calling other people, which we never like to see, obviously, but he was calling other people other than our command post, other than the negotiators, and we constantly would call him, and then there were times we gave him a break and gave him the opportunity to calm down a little bit, and then we'd call him back and discuss certain things. One of the things that we made sure of is that those individuals, the grandmother especially, had what she needed inside. We constantly worried about the welfare of the baby. What can we do to get things such as diapers and food to the baby and that sort of thing. So we were talking through that the entire time, and it took a long time to even get a bag of supplies to him, and which he ultimately was able to take off of the balcony and take inside, and hopefully that helped out the individuals that were inside. Any other?
I know you're not a medical doctor, but how did she survive that? I mean, the intent was there, and then the area where she was hit, I mean, it's all there, but how did she survive? Do you have any idea? Is it a miracle or what?
I truly believe it's a miracle, and I truly believe that it was her will to live, okay? Her will to survive that, and to, obviously I'm a father, and, you always worry about who else is behind. And that decision to flee obviously is a difficult thing. But I think she realized at that point she had to get help in order to get them help. So I think the will to survive is what got her through that. Any other questions?
Just a quick question. What time was the verbal domestic dispute called in?
I'll get that for you in the timeline afterwards. Anything?
If you could just talk a little bit about the means of entry, like was it multiple points, and did he try to shoot officers as you went in at the end?
I won't speak to specifics because of the tactical considerations and future incidents, but I will tell you the shots were fired as our officers were entering that apartment, and not by us.
Just a quick clarifying question. Was the woman inside that was Lewis's mother?
No, I don't believe so. That's the grandmother, yes.
The grandmother?
Grandmother, yes.
But her mother had been there.
She had been there earlier and had just left, and then I believe at that point, he saw an opportunity and entered.
This was an extraordinary circumstance. Have you ever, any of you, experienced a standoff anywhere close to this length and this complexity?
Director Martin spoke to his time. I'll let him answer that.
I'm an original member of the Dauphin County Crisis Response Team from 1992. No, I believe probably the longest we've gone is 12 to 16 hours in Dauphin County.
Do you think this is something that other law enforcement agencies across the country
extremely hot conditions. Yes, but I want to speak to, the professionalism of American law enforcement across the span of this country. The men and women across this country do a great job every day, and we learn from them. One thing about our profession is we're constantly evolving, and so they're probably, we may get some phone calls on picking our brains about some things, and that'll be great because we're all here to help each other, elevate ourselves to be better.
Okay, I'm going to close. I think we spent a pretty significant time talking about the incident. The thing I want to close with again, I want to thank every individual up here with us and their agencies. There are several agencies that couldn't make it. I want to thank our volunteers, obviously, especially our fire police that stood out there for no payment whatsoever in those heat conditions for those 2 days. And lastly, thank you to the residents of Penns Woods for your patience. Thank you.